Hi, everybody, and welcome to Big Joe's Journal. My name is Joe Tilden, and I am the host of this program. Well, here we are into July, and right now, here in Vermont, at least, and I think probably through much of the country, we are having a problem with a lack of rain. You know, there was a storm coming up the coast that was supposed to solve that problem for us over the weekend that pretty well took a sharp right turn, went out to sea. And we got some rain, but not really enough to, in this drought situation that we're in. And I think you can see that, if you watch your lawn, see how your lawn is growing. It's not growing as fast as it used to in previous years. And what we really need, weather-wise here, is a real good soaking. And put moisture back into the earth, and things will start to grow. Up in my neighborhood, which is out the far western end of Rutland near Pine Hill, we have a young male bear that is roaming around the neighborhood off and on. The other day, the visiting nurses have a office building over on West Street, and one of them came out the door and he was down in their parking lot. He Unfortunately for him, he can't get anything more at the village snack bar because they have now invested in these bear-proof trash cans. So he not only can't knock it over, he can't get it open. And I think the situation is probably the same through the woods. The berries and the other stuff that they eat to fatten up, they're just not coming around. They will be in time, but they should be out by this time. But I think probably with the drought that we're having, food is probably not that plentiful. And consequently, this young fella, I'd say less than 5 years old, probably, just been driven out of the den by his mother. As you know, bears, when they have cubs, the mother bear will keep the cubs for 2, sometimes 3 years at the most. But when she's ready to mate again, she shoos them out, sends them out on their own. And so this young guy is out on his own, and eventually he'll wander around and he'll go looking for a lady friend and so forth. And bears have a wandering capacity of about 200 miles. So where he goes from here, well, it remains to be seen. But that's just a little something interesting and something that I think the drought has a little bit to do with. Well, there is really no good news I'd say anywhere in the world right now. As you know, the coronavirus continues to grow. Just when you think maybe we've got a handle on it, maybe it's going to start to level off, it pops up again. Right now, Florida is sort of the center of where this is booming. They don't seem to be able to get a handle on it to stop it. The reason for that, of course, is the governor lifted the restrictions early, and the result was bingo. The coronavirus, COVID-19, more or less got a rebirth down there with people going down to the beach and everything else. Well, you can't blame people for going to the beach in hot weather, wicked hot weather. And also Texas. Now, Texas is talking about reinstating stay-at-home quarantines. And Arizona, where this thing is booming, and in California. California has put in restrictions they're requiring now that people wear face masks, that there's limited capacity where they have their public gatherings. They have to keep a distance. In the state of Maine, as summer visitors go to Maine, COVID-19 is on the rise in the state of Maine, mainly because people are not observing the separation, the 6-foot distance separation and all that. It's not on a high runaway thing like it is in Florida, but it has shown an increase. It's hard to believe nearly 136,000 Americans have died since March from this disease, and we're probably going to have a lot more. The prediction is up to 200,000. And it's very, very hard to believe. It's hard to swallow. But the medical profession is working to try to get a handle on it. They talk about these various vaccines, and hope comes up that they found one that works, and then, well, they're not quite sure. In the meantime, Dumbo in the White House is trying to make Dr. Posey, who is one of the nation's leading expert on controlling infectious diseases, trying to make him look bad. They're saying, well, he made a lot of mistakes, so forth and so on. And Dr. Posey himself has said that he hasn't talked with President Dumbo for at least 2 months. So it shows you where our leadership is. There isn't any. But this thing, it's definitely going to change the way we live. And there are going to have to be some drastic changes. Now, the Ivy League has already canceled all of its fall sports. The conference that Middlebury College belongs to has done the same. And I would expect that Castleton and Norwich will soon follow through. Now, you look at some of these big universities where football is a huge moneymaker. Say the Big Ten, actually the Big 14, the Atlantic Coast Conference, the Southeastern Conference, the Pac-10 out on the West Coast, the Big Ten west of the Mississippi. It'll be interesting to see what they are going to do. In the case of Dartmouth, Dartmouth has eliminated 5 minor sports, and they're talking the possibility of maybe the football season moving from fall to spring. But of course, that depends on how well this COVID-19 is under control. At the high school level, I would expect the chances are very good that I would imagine the fall sports seasons will be canceled there also. Now, people are going to say, why do it? Well, we have a pandemic going on, and people are dying. And if we're going to get a handle on it, you've got to set up some certain rules. They have to be quarantined. There has to be separation and so forth. Well, Major League Baseball is going to open, I believe, within another week or so. And they're going to be playing in stadiums with nobody there. The Toronto Blue Jays are probably not going to play any home games in Toronto. They may play in Buffalo, or there's also a rumor they might go to New Hampshire, play in Manchester. They have a farm team in Manchester, New Hampshire, and since there is no minor league baseball this year, it's possibly that the Blue Jays will locate in Manchester. And of course, that would set up more of a natural rivalry with the Red Sox just down the road at Fenway. But there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of enthusiasm for resuming the baseball season. Many of your top stars have opted out. They feel the risk to them and their families is too great. Buster Posey, who was the catcher for the San Francisco Giants, has opted out of playing on the grounds that he and his wife have just adopted identical twin girls, and he doesn't want to bring something home and infect his whole family. So he will be out. And I understand the Red Sox, there are at least 2, maybe 3, that are going to opt out of playing this baseball season. Well, it's a 60-game season, and baseball more or less needs to have a season to try to salvage what fandom it has left. The people are going to get through the summer, and they're not going to have any baseball. And baseball does not have a lot of appeal to the younger generation. And if baseball wants to remain intact as a major sport, I think they've got to put something on the field toward the end of this year to see what fans they can attract. Now, myself, I am a baseball fan, but I'm also 87 years old. Baseball would not appeal, say, to a 17 or a 27-year-old or a 37-year-old as it would to an 87-year-old. But for the good of the sport, it's been called over the years America's game. But I think it's been replaced by football, to tell you the truth. Excuse me, baseball attendance is down past few years. In the NFL, attendance is up. And that brings up another question. What about the NFL? Are they going to play this year? Well, they're talking about playing in stadiums with no fans. But a big problem would be your linemen. Now, down on the line, they're not 6 feet apart. They were 6 feet apart. Your running backs wouldn't be going anywhere. Because if they're that far back, these guys aren't going to be able to block for them. And the defensive line is going to come crashing through, and your top running backs are going to be grounded. Your passers who need protection, they just aren't going to have it. And you have to wonder how many players in the NFL are going to want to risk getting this COVID-19. Maybe they'll waive a season. Say, well, we'll see what happens, and where does it go from here? And so to look ahead and say, when this gets better, we're going to go to a new norm, we're going to resume where we were, that's just not going to happen. Because we don't know how long this is going to last. Is it going to last a year, 2 years, 3 years? And where do we go from there? And another thing, of course, that Dumbo seems more concerned about is the economy. And I think we all have concerns with the economy. There is no question that as a result of COVID-19, that we're going to be going into a depression. Probably even worse than the one back in 1929 and the 30s. And already, former Vice President Biden has proposed to get the country back on its feet that we adopt some of the programs of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. In other words, the government would become the employer of last resort. And we'd go back to programs like the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, repairing our infrastructure, our highways, our bridges, our railway transportation system, our airports, other changes that have to be made, reservoirs for our larger communities that are much more efficient, sewage plants to take care of the needs of our larger communities, which are inefficient. And there's so many things that need to be done. Now, is there anything good that has come out of this? And I think you have to look at it and you have to say yes. I think people have become much more concerned about family matters, coming close together, not wandering all over the country. And I think if there's anything good to come out of it, I think it has brought families closer together. Realize that we are responsible for one another. It has also brought communities closer together. We know that we can't exist in a vacuum, that we are in a society where we have to cooperate with one another. We have to take care of one another. We have to make sure that everyone in our community is taken care of, that no one exists alone. One of the tragedies that we're seeing, of course, the people that are desperate for food, folks that are out of work. And I can't even begin to imagine the anxiety of a father who's out of work, laid off, trying to figure out how he's going to pay his bills, feed his kids, send his kids to school. You know, for parents, this has got to be terrible anxiety. And yet it is reality, something that has to be faced. They're talking about reopening the schools, probably late August, September, and how they're going to do it. I think in the long run, we're going to have to turn the school year upside down. I think we're going to have to begin the school year in late March, run it through the summer, and maybe dismiss in December and take a winter vacation. Because much of your education now is going to have to be done outside. In other words, things are going to have to be done out of the classroom. Field trips is one way. Having places outside where students can go and have a class outside. I think that's the way we've got to go. Ventilation in these schools have to be improved. You know, some of the older buildings, and over the years I've taught in some of the older buildings, ventilation is terrible. And that's something that's got to be worked on. Keep the air moving and don't let it get stagnant. Well, you say, well, kids can't go to school, they can learn on a computer or have Zoom and all that. Well, I honestly don't, you know, if it's done, fine, but I honestly don't think that that is the best way to do it. There's no substitute for that personal relationship between the teacher and the student. And you can't have that on a TV screen or on a computer screen or on a phone screen or anything else you want. It's got to be face-to-face in person. And that's a special connection between teacher and student. And that's one of the great ways that learning takes place. The job of the teacher to provide the information for the student, to take that information, inspire his curiosity, so he wants to learn more, go on and find more. One of our greatest presidents was Abraham Lincoln. And Lincoln never had a diploma, never had a degree, never graduated from any school or anything else. But he educated himself by reading. A love of books. His stepmother taught him to read. And he educated himself through reading. He got admitted to the bar in Illinois to practice law. Not by going to any law school, but by reading up and studying law, and studying enough to be able to go and pass the bar exam. And of course, as we know, during his years in the White House, the great Civil War that was taking place, the agony and the trials that he had trying to pull the Union together and finally come up with a winning combination. And he had some of the wisest sayings of any president we've ever had. I venture he's probably the most intelligent president we've ever had. Certainly there's no comparison between Abraham Lincoln and the Dumbo we've got now. That is for sure. But education is extremely important. And how we handle it in this COVID-19 crisis is also extremely important. And I think probably we're going to try reopen the schools in the fall and see how far we can go. But if this thing continues another year, another 2 years, another 3 years, then we've got to back off a little bit and say it's time for change. It's time to revise the school year. Because much of your information and much of your learning, it's going to come from books, but those books can be read outside as well as in a classroom. And that's what we may be coming to, which is the reason why we would have to go to a revised school year. And I see the University of Vermont, they're talking about a fall semester beginning in August and winding up in November, Thanksgiving. When the students go home for Thanksgiving, that's it till the next semester starts. Probably in February or March. You look at the situation this year, the big bucks that parents were paying to send their kids to college, the room and the board alone, and tuition on top of that. Well, UVM has made some changes. They've cut some salaries, cut some positions, but unfortunately they haven't done it in the right place. The president of the University of Vermont could stand to have his salary cut by 50%. No university needs 18 vice presidents. I mean, the United States only has one. That's a lot bigger than the University of Vermont. Should lay off 17 of them. The people that they're cutting, and the salaries that they're cutting, are the lower income people. You know, your maintenance people, and the people that do the housekeeping in the dorms. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of their security detail are probably going to take a cut in pay. But that's the wrong end. You want to save money, you cut at the top and cut into the administration. UVM is top heavy with administrators, and they certainly could save a lot of money, as I said before, by unloading 17 of their 18 vice presidents and cutting the president's salary by 50%. He'd still live very, very comfortably. But when you're paying a college president well over $6 million at the University of Vermont, the state of Vermont, where we're wondering how we're going to fund our state colleges, things seem a little extreme when you're paying that much money. Well, as far as our state colleges go, the former chancellor, Jeb Spaulding, recommended some drastic cuts, eliminating Johnston Linden and VTC in Randolph. I think if he'd toned that down a little bit, he could have had the same results. If I were in his shoes, I would close Johnston, because that is close enough to Burlington. For the kids that want a college education, they come into UVM, St. Mike's, Champlain, Community College of Vermont, which is in Winooski. I keep Linden open. Linden is up there in the Northeast Kingdom, and it has a very, very strong effect on the economy in that area. And if you close Linden, some of those kids to go to college would have to travel quite a distance. So I'd leave Linden open. Came to Vermont Technical College, I'd close the Williston campus. But I would leave the one in Randolph open. That's the original campus. I would leave that one open. And I think you'd have a little savings there. You know, there's a lot of politics played in how our colleges are handled. Karen Scafaro came over to Castleton, and she was pretty much hired to do a hatchet job. It's not always easy to do, but she closed down a few things, laid off a few people. But at the same time, she developed a number of programs and reinforced other programs over at Castleton University. And then for whatever reason, she got the axe. Well, you know, as you look at your state college board, you have to ask yourself how many educators are on that board. The new chancellor is an attorney. The new chancellor should be an educator, but she's an attorney. And most of your people on the board are not educators themselves, they're businessmen and women. And unfortunately, that's the way they think. Right now, of course, Castleton University is looking for a new president. I really think they made a mistake when they let Mr. Cafaro go. I think it was a huge mistake. But what's done is done. Now, one of the excuses they gave was the fact that she applied to be the president of Champlain College. And of course, she was one of the 3 finalists, but she did not get the job. The former president of the College of St. Joseph is running for the state legislature in Rutland District 1, which is rather interesting. Well, right now, the only college we've got in this area is Castleton. Castleton is booming. They've got a good solid enrollment. They've taken over some programs. One is the hospitality program at Killington that was run for the last, I believe, 3 or 4 years by Green Mountain College. Castleton has taken over that. With the closing of Southern Vermont College in Bennington, Castleton has taken over their nursing program. So they have expanded, and they are a leading force for higher education in Southern Vermont. Right now, the only one. So we look at the situation we're in. Right now, of course, when people vote, I believe the vast majority are going to vote by mail. I think people are still afraid to go out. I know your churches are very rarely full. I was talking with the secretary at St. Peter's this morning. I said, well, how many people did you have at Mass Saturday night? The allowed capacity for St. Peter's is 115. Total capacity at St. Peter's is about 900. And they're allowed 115. But she said it was one of the biggest crowds we've ever had. About 60 people. As people are still very, very concerned about going out. Another thing involving Enterprise is the revival of the drive-in theaters. The one here at the fairgrounds. And I believe there's going to be one in Fairhaven, as I understand it. And they're occurring in other areas around the state, around the country. The one up at the Champlain Valley Exposition is already running. So, you know, what comes around goes around. When I was younger, we used to refer to the drive-ins as passion pits. And here in Rutland, we had one down here in South Main Street. It's where the Toyota dealership is right now. That was the Rutland Drive-In. And we had one over in Castleton, the Fort Warren Drive-In. The first drive-in in the state of Vermont was on the town line between Randolph and Bethel. And it was called the Twin Towns Drive-In. And there's another one in Windsor and one in Bellows Falls, one in Bennington. Go up to Burlington. Burlington had at least 3. So they went out of business, but now they're coming back. People can go watch a movie, sit in their car. As I understand it, if they order something like popcorn or soda or whatever, that it will be delivered to them. The next thing to bring back, of course, might be the A&W root beer stands. You know, where the girls run roller skates, placed your order, they came out and served you, had a tray, and who knows? We're going back to the 40s, going back to the 50s, and after we get a control on this pandemic, if we ever do, when we have a new administration, in order to combat the Depression, we'll be going back to the 30s and adopting some of the programs that helped bring the country out of that Depression. So a lot is happening. A lot of changes are coming. People talk about the new norm. Well, we'll see. So with that, may Almighty God in his infinite wisdom continue to bless these United States of America. God love you. We'll see you all next week.